before cemeteries existed, where early humans left their dead. Imagine standing in total darkness, deep inside a cave untouched by sunlight for tens of thousands of years. Your breath echoes off stone walls. The air is cold. Then your light reveals something impossible to ignore: human bones, carefully placed, deliberately arranged. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Loved. This child died 78,000 years ago, long before cities, before religion, before cemeteries even existed. And yet someone carried this small body into the earth, chose this exact place, and said goodbye in the only way they knew how. This wasn't disposal. This was meaning. Before gravestones, before graveyards, before we had words for mourning, humans were already asking the same question we still ask today: what do we do with our dead? And the answers they left behind, hidden in caves, mountains, and forgotten landscapes, reveal the very moment humanity began to understand love, loss, and the idea that death is never just the end. Tonight, we're going back before history began to uncover where humans left their dead and why it changed us forever. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will change how you think about death, memory, and what it means to be human. Let's start our journey in 2013, in a cave system northwest of Johannesburg, South Africa. A place called Rising Star. Two recreational cavers squeezed through a gap so narrow it was called Superman's crawl. You had to hold your breath and slide through sideways. On the other side, they dropped down into a chamber, and what they found there shocked the scientific world. Bones. Hundreds of bones. At least 15 individuals, all belonging to a species we now call Homo naledi. These weren't modern humans. They had brains about 1/3 the size of ours. They lived roughly 300,000 years ago, possibly longer. And here's the incredible part: the evidence suggests they deliberately carried their dead deep into this cave system. Think about what that means. To reach this chamber, you have to navigate pitch-black passages, squeeze through gaps barely wide enough for a human body, and climb down into the earth. There's no food there. No water. No reason to go there except one: to leave the dead. The chamber is called the Dinaledi Chamber, which means Chamber of Stars in the local Sotho language. And researchers believe it may be the oldest burial site ever discovered. Not by Homo sapiens, but by a distant relative with a much smaller brain. This discovery shattered our assumptions. We used to think only large-brained, cognitively advanced humans engaged in burial rituals. But Homo naledi had brains smaller than chimpanzees in some cases, yet they seemed to understand death as something significant, something that required action, that required a special place. The bodies weren't just dumped there. They were placed in a remote, difficult-to-reach location, suggesting intention and effort. Some scientists argue about whether this was true burial or just disposal, but either way, these early human relatives were doing something with their dead that required planning, cooperation, and possibly even emotion. Now let's fast forward and travel to the Zagros Mountains of Iraq, to a cave called Shanidar. In 1960, archaeologist Ralph Selecki was excavating this cave when he made a discovery that would become legendary. He found the remains of 9 Neanderthals who had lived and died there between 65,000 and 35,000 years ago. But one individual, dubbed Shanidar 4, was different. When scientists analyzed the soil around this Neanderthal skeleton, they found something unexpected: clumps of flower pollen. Not just one or two types, but several species including hollyhock, bachelor's button, and yarrow. The distribution pattern suggested these flowers had been placed with the body deliberately. For decades, this was celebrated as evidence that Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, that they had funerals, that they mourned. It became one of the most famous burial sites in archaeology, proof that our extinct cousins had emotions and rituals like us. The story gets more complicated though. Some researchers later argued the pollen could have been brought in by burrowing rodents or blown in by wind. The debate continues to this day. But here's what we know for certain: Neanderthals did bury their dead. Multiple Neanderthal burial sites have been found across Europe and the Middle East. At La Chapelle Auxiliary Saints in France, a Neanderthal was placed in a shallow pit that had been dug into the cave floor. At La Ferracie, Also in France, 7 Neanderthals were buried, including several children. These weren't accidents. These were deliberate acts. Why did Neanderthals bury their dead? We don't know for sure. Maybe it was practical, to keep predators away or prevent disease. Maybe it was emotional, an expression of grief. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something spiritual, an early belief that death wasn't the end. What's remarkable is that Neanderthals weren't just dumping bodies in random places. They were choosing specific locations within caves, places that were part of their living spaces, places they returned to again and again. The dead weren't being removed from the community. They were being integrated into the home. Now we come to our own species, Homo sapiens, and the oldest confirmed burials by modern humans. About 120,000 years ago in what is now Israel, in caves called Kafseh and Skul, early Homo sapiens were not just burying their dead but doing something more elaborate. At Kafseh Cave, archaeologists found the skeleton of a young child, perhaps 9 years old, buried with the skull and antlers of a large deer placed on top of the body. This wasn't random. Someone took the time to hunt or find this deer, remove its antlers, and place them with this child. This is one of the earliest examples of grave goods, objects placed with the deceased. At Skul Cave, researchers found an adult buried with the jawbone of a wild boar clutched in their arms. Again, this is intentional. This is symbolism. This is meaning-making. These burials are significant because they show that early Homo sapiens weren't just disposing of bodies or even just placing them carefully in the ground. They were adding things to the graves, objects that had meaning, objects that might have represented the person's life, their identity, or beliefs about the afterlife. Let me paint you a picture of what these burial sites looked like. Unlike modern cemeteries with rows of graves and headstones, these were small, scattered burials within cave systems. A family or group would live in these caves, and when someone died, they would dig a shallow pit in the floor of the cave or in a side chamber. The body would be placed in a flexed position, knees drawn up to the chest, almost like they were sleeping or returning to the womb. Then came the ritual part. They might place red ochre, a natural pigment, on the body. They might add tools, animal bones, or shells. Then they'd cover the body with soil and stones. There were no markers, no names carved in stone, no way for future generations to know who was buried there. The location itself was the memorial. The cave was both home and resting place. The living and the dead shared the same space. This tells us something profound about how early humans thought about death. The dead weren't separate. They weren't banished to distant graveyards. They remained with the family, beneath the very floor where children played and meals were cooked. Not all early humans put their dead in the ground. Some gave them to the sky. Now, we need to acknowledge that we're moving forward in time a bit here, but understanding sky burial helps us imagine how some ancient peoples might have dealt with death in places where the ground was too hard, too frozen, or too sacred to dig. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and in other cultures across Central Asia, the dead are taken to high mountain peaks and left for vultures. This practice, called jata or sky burial, might sound shocking to modern Western ears, but it's based on a profound philosophy. The body is just a vessel, and once the soul has left, the most compassionate thing you can do is return that body to nature, to feed other living beings. While we can't prove ancient humans practiced exactly this, we have evidence of something similar. At sites in Central Asia, archaeologists have found human bones scattered on exposed mountaintops and plateaus with cut marks and signs of exposure to scavengers. These weren't victims of violence but deliberate placements. Why would anyone do this? In landscapes where wood for cremation is scarce and the ground is permafrost, sky burial makes practical sense. But it's also deeply spiritual. The circle of life is immediate and visible. The vultures that consume the body are called dakinis in Tibetan Buddhism, angels that carry the soul to the next realm. This shows us that early humans had options. Not everyone buried their dead underground. Some let them become part of the sky. Some might have placed them in trees, a practice still found in some cultures. Others might have left them on platforms or in boats set adrift on rivers or seas. The point is that before cemeteries, before standardized death rituals, different groups of humans were experimenting with different ways to handle death, each method reflecting their environment, their beliefs, and their relationship with nature. So when did cemeteries actually begin? The answer takes us to Turkey, to one of the most mysterious archaeological sites on Earth, Göbekli Tepe. Built around 11,500 years ago, before agriculture, before pottery, before metal tools, Göbekli Tepe is a massive stone temple complex. Massive T-shaped pillars covered with carved animals stand in circular arrangements. It took hundreds of people to build this place, and here's the key point: it wasn't a settlement. No one lived there. People came to Göbekli Tepe for gatherings, rituals, and possibly funerals. Recent excavations have found human bones at the site, deliberately placed, suggesting this was among the earliest communal burial grounds, a prototype cemetery. The shift from scattered cave burials to designated burial sites marks a huge change in human behavior. It happened around the same time we started settling down, domesticating plants and animals, building permanent structures. Suddenly humans weren't just nomads anymore. We were building civilization, and civilization needs places to remember. The first true cemeteries appeared in the Neolithic period, around 10,000 years ago. In places like Atalay in Turkey, people buried their dead beneath the floors of their houses, but in much larger numbers and with more elaborate rituals. Some settlements had entire neighborhoods that became burial grounds. By 5,000 years ago, in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, we see the first large-scale cemeteries separated from living spaces. The dead got their own cities, necropolises, with streets and houses for the deceased. But before all of that, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans buried their dead wherever felt right, in caves, on mountaintops, by rivers, in the places they called home. There were no rules, no traditions, just people figuring out how to say goodbye. So what does all of this tell us? Before cemeteries existed, death wasn't hidden away. It wasn't sanitized or standardized. The dead were part of the landscape, part of daily life, part of the family. Whether buried in cave floors, placed on mountain peaks, or laid to rest with flowers and antlers, every burial was a personal statement, an act of love or respect or hope. These ancient burial sites reveal something fundamental about being human. We've always known that death matters. We've always felt that the dead deserve something more than abandonment. And we've always used burial, in whatever form, to say that life has meaning. The next time you visit a modern cemetery with its neat rows and polished stones, remember that you're participating in a ritual that goes back hundreds of thousands of years, back to the first humans who looked at a body and decided it needed a special place, back to the first burial in the first cave. If this video changed how you think about death and human history, please like and subscribe. Share this with someone who loves archaeology or just good storytelling. And drop a comment telling me what surprised you most about where early humans buried their dead. Next week, we're diving into another mystery of ancient human behavior, so make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.